Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna make a really cute summer midi, I don't know, it's something in between. It's like a knee-length skirt. You can't see it in my background. I was about to say you can't see it in my background already, but you still can't see it. Anyways, it's gonna be a surprise. We're starting off great. So welcome back to my channel. We're gonna make a knee-length skirt today, and the skirt actually is gonna have a lot of panels in between. Like, it's gonna have this zigzag shape. I have a drawing right here, so you can see there are these zigzaggy shapes everywhere, and we're gonna put some circle parts into those cutouts basically. So it's gonna be a very voluminous skirt in the end with a lot of twirlability, I guess. So I hope it's gonna look very cute. I love the mock-up already. So I chose this very cute greenish blue cotton muslin fabric, which hopefully is going to be a good choice for summer, as it's not going to be too warm. It's going to have the breathing capabilities that you need in summer, and also if it wrinkles up, it doesn't matter because the fabric already has this wrinkly texture, even if it's, you know, ironed. So I guess this is the perfect fabric. I hope the skirt is going to look great in this color as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So what I found from working on my mock-up was to do this in an orderly manner. So you're not going to start in the front and work your way towards both sides to the back. You're going to start on one side of the back, because it can get a little confusing with the panels, because you have to do like waist panel, waist panel, waist panel, and so on. So you need to do this in an organized manner. Also, I have everything obviously in my sewing instructions, but for everybody who is wondering, yes, I added these strips to the panels because they lay on the bias. This is interfacing tape with a stay stitch, so this is not stretchy anymore, even though it is on the bias, or like somewhat on the bias. It's not an actual bias, which would be here, but it's still stretching out if you don't put anything. I have 6 panels that I cut out on fold, and then I have one that is actually divided into 2 pieces for the back. So there's going to be the center back right here and the zipper. So everything is written down on the pattern as well. You need 6 panels on fold and 1 panel with a seam in the back. So all in all, 7 panels or 8 pieces. So that's that. So let's get actually started with the sewing. So you need your back piece right here, and you have your center back on one side. So let's actually start coming from the right, going over to the left side. So I have one of my back panels right here, and I'm gonna take one of the halved triangular inserts. So this is one for the back, and this is going to be placed right here. This is the center back seam, and it's going to continue into the panel right here, and I'm going to sew it onto this diagonal seam right here. So I'm going to do a few things that will be important for sewing, and it's probably best if you do that too, because we have all these weird angles. It's always best to mark your stitching line. So for me on the back panel, it's easy enough because I have my interfacing tape with a stay stitch on, and that is 1 centimeter, so I know exactly my stitching line is right in here. For this piece right here, I have it on one side but not on the other. So let's actually draw on my stitching line by measuring 1 centimeter inwards. So I know exactly it's right here. I'm going to do the same on the other side as prep work because I need it in a second as well. So you can go around on all of these waist pieces right here and do the exact same for these 3 corners. And then you can do that for the panels as well, because once we place these together, we need a pin, and we're gonna stick the pin right through that crisscross. And that needs to match up with this point right here. And then I'm gonna pin this in place. And now I can, you know, lay everything flat that goes here, and also pin this together with the panel. And now I want to sew from that crisscross line to this crisscross line, not any further, because we're going to cut stuff off and it needs to lay a different direction and so on. So just go from here all the way to here. Okay, I also went ahead and overlocked this seam. Very important here. Cut towards the stitching line at the point where you stopped stitching here, which is going to be the notch in any other pattern, because then you can overlock that small section separately from this line. We're going to do that in a bit as well. And now I want to iron the seam allowance into the panel. And that is the first panel done. Now we can take one that lays on fold, and that one is gonna go right here, so onto the other diagonal seam here with our tip. And you have the stitching line marked here again as well, like with the tape. And you're gonna find a notch down here, it's right here, which marks exactly this point here. So this notch, I'm gonna draw it on for you guys. So this notch right here needs to match up with the stitching line right here, right where you stopped stitching. So that once you sew here, you're gonna catch the end point of your seam that you just did. And then the tip of that insert, which is right here, needs to match up with the stitching line in that corner, which we just marked right here. And that can now also be pinned together. The in-between needs to be matched up like that. And that is the diagonal portion, and then the lower portion right here just needs to get matched up with the other insert all the way down to the hem like that. And now you're gonna sew from this point right here, the tip of the insert, over that notch point where we just ended the other seam, down to the hem. And that's what it looks like. As you can see, a very nice triangle. So let's also iron that into the insert. And as you can see, I also overlocked that seam while I was at it. And I just cut into the seam allowance right here at the tip of that insert because, as you can see, it wants to overlap because otherwise it's just gonna bulk up. So you wanna do that as well. And then just carefully iron to one side. And now you have one piece fully done, and we're gonna continue doing that for all of the other pieces. So now here, we're gonna add the side back with the back dividing seam. Right here is the side seam. And now we're gonna put right sides together of side back and back. Again, if it helps you, draw in your stitching line right here, because that now needs to get matched up with this point. So using a pin again. Match them up, and then also the insert. So you need to pivot your piece at that point right here at that notch so that you can match up the side back right down here at your stitching line with the zigzag notch in the insert. And now you want to match these two lengths up. And I'm also going to go ahead and cut towards the stitching line here because it seems to want to lay openly. So I'm going to do that here as well, like that, because the seam allowance wants to lay into the insert how we ironed it, and otherwise it's just gonna, there's just gonna be a lot of bulk over which we are sewing instead. So let's just flip it out of the way. And you want to make sure that this is not gonna create a hole. And now you want to sew from that point down here where your notch is over this section here towards the waistline. So again, I had to cut into the seam allowance of the insert right here at the zigzag notch in order to be able to overlock correctly. So let's iron this. Right here, I also need to cut towards that notch where the inserts start at the tip of the insert. So let's iron the seam allowance into the insert. And then at the back dividing seam right here, I want to iron towards the center back. So in this direction here. And there's a lot of bulk now created through the seam allowances, so I'm just gonna cut them diagonally so that I don't have too many edges on top of each other, so they kind of lay next to each other instead, like this. I'm not gonna take anything away from this point, just up here so that they lay nicely next to each other, like that. And you probably also want to make sure that there is no fold line right here. And that is two of the waist panels now in place, and essentially it's gonna continue the same way as I just showed you. So you want to add another insert, one that lays on fold, then your side front piece, another insert, front piece, insert, side front, insert, side back, insert, back, and then half, like the only thing that's left, one of the half panels for the back. Just be sure to be very, very precise with these inserts so that they look super crisp, super nice. You can add a top stitch once you're completely done. Right here on top, like into the inserts, so that you have your seam allowances that face into the insert fixed in place, so along here. But only once everything is done. And that also gives strength to like these weak points right here, like the tip. Also this one is a weak point, not as weak, but this is also one, especially up here. So you give that a little bit more strength as well. But you can, you know, finish everything and then see how you like it and see how your fabric specifically behaves. Because I have a very loose weave, so for me the weak points are even weaker than for somebody who is using a fabric with a tighter weave. So that might not be the case with your fabric. But I am definitely thinking about adding a top stitch right here once I'm done. But let's continue with the next insert and repeat the whole process once I'm done. And then I'll be back. So I finished the skirt with all of the inserts right here, so we can continue now with the facing. And the facing is pretty straightforward. You have all of the same pieces essentially, apart from the zigzaggy bit down here. So you just want to put these together the same way. So close the back dividing seam, then the side seam, then the front dividing seam, and repeat the same for the other side. So let's go ahead and do that. For the facings, I want to iron the seam allowance open just to avoid any bulk, and you also don't need to overlock this as it will be hidden. The seams will be hidden. So let's do the side front, and then you can put the front and repeat the same for the other side. So just like that. And now we can put our facing right sides on top of the shell, match up all of the dividing seams, and sew along the waistline to add the facing to the skirt. Okay, with all of that done, let's iron the facing down into the piece onto the wrong side, while making sure that the ditch of the seam is only visible on that wrong side here. And because I understitched, the seam already wants to lay that way, so it's pretty easy to iron if you feather it out like that. And that is what the front looks like. And we can go ahead and add the zipper. So we're gonna do a lined, half-line zipper because we have the facing. And you're gonna find your zipper notch at the exact spot where the zigzag notch is right here. So go ahead and mark that if you can see it like me. Let's open our zipper up. Put right sides together, starting at the waistline. Determine your actual zipper point at the top. So right here, where the plastic stopper is your actual end of your zipper. And that needs to match up with the fold line right here of your skirt. So let's pin that there. And work your way down without stretching either the zipper or the fabric. And let's sew the zipper side in. Close the zipper back up and mark your seams that need to be matched up. So for me, definitely this seam right here. I also like to mark the zipper notch down here, so where I stopped sewing, and where the fold line of my, or in my case, I think I'm gonna mark this seam right here. So let's open it back up and match that onto the other side. And I like to start off with the point in the center. So I need this right here to match up with the seam that I have in this piece. And then this down here with the zipper notch, and the upper portion with the seam. And now I'm gonna sew this side on. Okay, now let's close this, check if you're satisfied with everything, and we can go ahead and also close the remaining center back seam. So I'm just gonna put right sides of my center back together, and I'm gonna sew to a little bit beneath that zipper notch. So let's do that. And now I'm gonna iron the seam open of the center back. And I'm also gonna turn everything right sides around. As you can see, I shortened the zipper as well and added a bar tag right here. So let's turn everything right sides out and also flatten that seam, the zipper seam. And as you can see, it's almost invisible, which is very good. So let's flatten out the upper portion as well. And that's the zipper for the shell done. I want to turn everything wrong sides out again to line the zipper with the facing. So I have on top here, I have my fold line right here until where I put the zipper essentially. And that I want to use as a point to flip the facing over top. So I'm not folding at my seam, which is right here, but I'm folding like a millimeter in, which is my fold line of my waist seam. So I'm gonna pin that in place and go all the way down as much as it reaches. Now I can use a one-sided foot and sew next to the zipper teeth along here. And I want to do exactly the same on this side. So fold this upper edge out of the way, like so. Fold this down at the fold line and pin this in place. And I also want to make sure that this point where the facing stops is at the same height as on the other side. So I'm just quickly going to do that by comparing the two sides, which seems to match up. So now I can go ahead and sew that. Okay, with that done, let's cut the edge up here down so that once we turn everything right sides out, there is no bulk. And let's turn it right sides out. And use the zipper to pop out the edge. And we probably also want to iron this seam here on the inside, nice and flat. It looks super clean, love that. And the facing also needs to be sewn down. You can do that with a stitch in the ditch because the facing reaches until that zigzag starts. So you can do it either vertically by the stitch in the ditch here, or you can do the top stitching that I already mentioned. I will probably do the stitch in the ditch because I really like the non-top stitch-y look. I'm gonna go ahead and do the stitch in the ditch all around the whole waist piece. And last thing to do is to hem the skirt. As you can see, I already went ahead and overlocked the hemline because it is only round hemline since we used circular pieces. So if you overlock, it tends to be easier, or if you do a top stitch down there, it tends to be easier to fold double the 5 millimeters like that. So I'm just gonna do that and sew at 5 millimeters. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this project. Haven't done a skirt in a long time, so I'm super excited to have this beautiful piece now in my wardrobe. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You can ring the bell down below as well, so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post on Sundays, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, if you haven't already, go check out my social media. I post short format content. That's also a very good way to support me and my channel. Another good way to support me and my channel, actually the best way, is to head over to my Etsy store, where you can also find the pattern for this skirt. And if you find anything else that you'd like, it would be super helpful and supportive to also get those. So thank you so much for that. The material list, as always, is linked in my description box down below. So if you find anything that I used and that you also want to get, there will be an Amazon link down below. So check that out if you haven't already. Also, another way to support me is to become a channel member. It's not much, but you know, anything helps. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys!